back again with another episode. It's been a long while, so we're going to bring you a little bit of 49ers training camp talk. Check out right now, right after this intro.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on three. 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
Welcome back, 49ers Red Zone family. It's been a long while since Rohan and I have done a podcast together. Rohan's been living the dream in Europe. I've been very busy with work and schoolwork and stuff like that. But we're back with a 49ers training camp episode. That Deebo, that like button. Yes. Deebo, right? Like, that's the big talk, right? Like, Deebo should be being extended sometime very, very soon. Our intro obviously has Deebo Samuel hitting the gritty while Trey Lance is throwing out bombs. But how you doing, Rohan? Let's talk a little about you. How you doing, my man?
Oh, living life. The last 2 weeks were definitely a ton of fun for me. Like you said, I was in Europe, but now we are back to it. Definitely excited to get 49ers Red Zone content back out there. Talk some 49ers football because, like you said, training camp is just around the door. 4 days away, and there's going to be a ton of news with that. We've got training camp battles, we've got the Trey talk, we've got Deebo talk, and so much that is about to happen, but so much that has happened over the last 2 weeks as well.
Yes, sir. So shout out to Niner by Nature 88 in the chat, letting everyone know, hit that like button on our video. Make sure you guys subscribe to the 49ers Red Zone on our YouTube channel. My boy Rohan's always working hard. Right for 49ers Web Zone. So make sure you follow him at Rohan Sports 27. My man's been I think you changed your name not so long ago, right? On Twitter.
Yeah,
Rohan.
I changed it on Twitter, but you can definitely find the work, like you said, on our YouTube channel, on 49ers Web Zone. It's all over the place. Be sure to hit us up. Be sure to give us a follow, a like, and shout us out on Twitter with any questions that you have.
So let's get straight to it, Rohan. So we're talking 49ers training camp, right? So
Yeah.
the big talk is going into training camp is definitely going to be Trey Lance, right? So that's definitely be a topic. But the biggest topic right now, leading up to training camp, is Deebo Samuel's contract. What do you think happens with Deebo Samuel's contract? Does it get done before training camp? Does he sit out a day? Does he show up to practice and not practice? What happens with Deebo Samuel if a contract doesn't get done by that deadline, which is on Tuesday, correct?
Yeah, August 26th is the deadline. And I personally am of the belief that Deebo Samuel will be extended before training camp starts. I think that Deebo Samuel will not touch on the football field before he gets that new contract. I know we've talked about this before. I think if Deebo Samuel doesn't get that contract, he'll essentially hold in. He'll report to camp, but he won't practice, similar to how he did during mandatory minicamp, where he was reporting to camp, but also just on the sidelines doing his own work. I think that that'll happen. But everything we've heard, the relationship is amicable, and all the dominoes that have needed to fall have fallen. We've seen contracts for A.J. Brown and Terry McLaurin more recently pop up. Those are the baseline contracts for a Deebo Samuel extension in terms of the money guaranteed, in terms of the signing bonus, in terms of all the major numbers. Those are the baseline talks, whereas a lot of the other contracts that happened were because of other reasons. Players had a different extension before that gets the contract to a certain number. So to me, I'm using those two numbers, and with that in mind, you can get a Deebo Samuel type of extension done. That has been done, but also I think that Deebo Samuel he wants to be on the field. He reported to minicamp, unlike the other receivers who hadn't gotten a contract extension. And the Kyle Shanahan talk about Deebo Samuel really indicated to me that this extension will be done. News kind of did come out in a way. Deebo Samuel has shown up in San Francisco this past week. He's training in the Bay Area, and his trainer did release a video saying he's going to get paid.
I saw that video, but the thing is so a lot of 49er fans, right? They came out like, oh, Deebo's in NSF. He's going to get extended. He actually has like a camp for the kids today that he had going on. So that's why he was in San Francisco. he was getting everything, like all those little wrinkles out for that camp. So like, let's just be clear. Like, there's probably stuff like getting worked out with the contract and everything, but he also had a camp. So like, we can't speculate in terms of Deebo's going to get done. I know the 49ers did. They did want the contract done by Saturday, so which is tomorrow. Now the likelihood of that happening, I don't know, but I was told that 49ers wanted Saturday was like a kind of like a deadline for the 49 for the organization standpoint to get something done, but it gives them a couple days to write. So like they wanted Saturday to have it pretty much done, but it gives them 3 days to figure something out before then. So that was like their timeline from what I was told. I think he gets extended as well, right? Like at the end of the day, you got to keep playmakers. You got to keep the best players on your team. You keep the guys around you happy. There's frustration around the organization, from what I'm well told, right? There's a lot of frustration. Players are frustrated with how contracts work, how their contracts are being situated in the 49ers organization. They understand the 49ers like to do business on their terms, and they like to go free agency or draft free agency and then extend players right before the deadline. But players don't like that. These players like getting this money before they start offseason training. And the reason is because if they get injured during the offseason training, that guaranteed money isn't there, right? So like they're putting all this work during the offseason, and if they get injured, then next thing you know, they don't have any guaranteed money on their contract. So this is why players are frustrated. They rather have that extension prior to them starting to bust their butts, right? So I personally think Deebo gets extended, like you. I think he might hold in. I think that's the most logical scenario. But I really, really, really want the 49ers to extend him before training camp starts because Deebo Samuel has missed a lot of quality time with Trey Lance. We need that every rep in camp that they get, that timing down, that chemistry they could get. So that's something that I really want to happen. I see Niner by Nature 88 in the comment. Yeah, he has a good comment right here. Eric Davis believes Jimmy is going to stay. So if you guys are in the comments, you guys are watching on Twitter, you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you guys drop a comment with any of you guys' questions about training camp. Rohan and I will answer every question we possibly can in this chat. What do you think? We just talked about Deebo, right? So then the next topic becomes Jimmy and Trey, right? Those are the two very, very big topics around. What do you think happens with Jimmy Garoppolo? Because he's been, like I had told you, and it's been confirmed. I tweeted out in a comment to Wayne Breezy that he was started throwing at the end of June. Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter ended up coming out and confirming what I had tweeted, that he was throwing at the last week of June. So he's about to be cleared within like the next couple weeks from what I was told. What do you think happens with Jimmy? Does someone trade for him? Does he get cut? Does he be on the 49ers training camp? Does he have to play a preseason game to show teams that he's healthy and could throw? What happens with Jimmy, Rohan?
I think this Jimmy Garoppolo conversation, I know we've been going at it for 4 to 5 months. I think it actually got a lot more interesting when we just hear this news because you're right. He's been throwing right since the end of June. I know you tweeted it. We talked about it. The next day, Matt Barrows comes out and gives us the report that Jimmy Garoppolo was throwing for 2 to 3 weeks prior to that report. Then we get the two major sources. Both Schefter and Rappaport have commented that Jimmy Garoppolo began throwing. Schefter goes as far to say that Jimmy Garoppolo has been cleared by doctors already. To what capacity, we don't know, but he has been cleared by doctors. And so to me, what I see is Jimmy Garoppolo, that final hurdle in a way, is right around the corner. It's just, can he make all the throws now that teams want him to do? And you've seen a bunch of teams fire, do their due diligence, whatever that BS kind of means. But really, there is interest in Garoppolo, and I actually think there could be a deal done. And here's why. Garoppolo's contract is non-guaranteed. Back in the early part of the offseason, the 49ers were trying to trade Garoppolo and his $24.2 million salary away without trying to get money in return, because other players with similar contracts were being given away with teams not having to eat that money. But now we're in a different stage of the offseason. There aren't teams with that amount of cap space, which means the 49ers will not be, or Jimmy Garoppolo will not be having that salary for 2022. Now, when you look at it, Jimmy Garoppolo is essentially going to have his contract reworked, be it via trade or via release. In my eyes, Jimmy Garoppolo is a free agent. Jimmy Garoppolo, now the 49ers have given Jimmy Garoppolo's camp really the ability to renegotiate with other teams. So Jimmy Garoppolo is a free agent right now, in my eyes, where he can just negotiate a contract and try and come to an agreement with a different team. Then it turns into a sign and trade where the team gives compensation in return. To me, though, I don't know if a trade will happen just because Jimmy Garoppolo will choose where he wants to go. And I think the teams interested in trading for him right now or interested in giving capital away aren't necessarily winning teams, which I think Jimmy Garoppolo will try to go to.
And I absolutely agree with everything you're saying, right? So Jimmy G and his camp are speaking to other teams, which they want to get a deal done, right?
Yeah.
The reports came out that the 49ers had good progress on a contract, and then that late end surgery where Jimmy could have done that surgery right after the season, right? Normally, players, what they try to do is they try to get that surgery done like that week of the season ending or like the week after. Instead, he's like, nah, you know what? I'm waiting heck a long till I get this surgery. I'm gonna ruin the 49ers plans. I'm gonna get myself cut. I'm gonna get maybe traded to the team I want to go to. And then all of a sudden, all these teams have their quarterbacks, right? Like Deshaun Watson goes to the Browns. Baker Mayfield goes to Carolina. It looks like Atlanta's in the mix. There's a couple others. Seattle's in the mix. So, like, we don't really know what teams. The Giants have been rumored. But there's breaking news that my guy Rohan broke earlier today that I thought was very significant, right? Because the big topic has always been Trey Lance has arm fatigue and Trey Lance doesn't have the arm strength. Well, breaking news. Breaking news. Jimmy Garoppolo has the 39th highest throw power in Madden 23 with an 87. And Trey Lance has the 19th highest throw power in Madden 23 with a 91. There's no arm fatigue for Trey Lance. I think Madden has some insider trading people inside the building, letting everyone know there's no arm fatigue, and stuff like that. So the thing is I thought this was significant when I saw this earlier on your timeline. I saw it and I saved it because I wanted to talk about this. Right? If Jimmy Garoppolo lacks the talent, right, that Trey Lance has, like we know Trey Lance has the physical attributes. He has the mental capacity for this system. He has the leadership ability. Why do people, Rohan? Let me ask you this question, and this is a question that going to camp, I believe, will be answered by all the 49er fans in attendance and the media. Why did the media try to bring Trey Lance down when we know he has the attributes to be a good quarterback in the NFL, especially in Kyle Shanahan's offense? What specific ability do you think will shine during training camp from Trey Lance?
To me, first of all, when we talk about arm fitness, right, I want to bring up training camp because training camp is a time where quarterbacks are throwing day after day after day. Just for an example, the 49ers hold training camp practices on the 26th, the 27th, the 28th, and I believe it's either the 29th or the 30th. But more or less, that's 3 days in a row where they have practice, and apparently Trey Lance needs days off after every single practice because of arm fatigue. I think the one thing that we're going to see, we saw last offseason, and we're going to see once again this offseason, Trey Lance is going to be throwing in every single one of these days, and he's going to be throwing as a starter. He's going to be throwing the majority of the balls, proving these arm fatigue kind of reports wrong, at least for now, right? Maybe it was present last year. We don't know behind the scenes. That could have been hidden. But at this point, I think that Trey Lance will prove those reports wrong just because he's going to be out there at training camp every day. And to me, the one question that I just want Trey Lance to answer, he answered it somewhat in the minicamp performances, throwing for 74% of his passes. But can he be accurate when pads are on? Can he be accurate in a standpoint that is closest to the in-game reality? That's the one question that I want to see answered in training camp, because last offseason, Trey Lance wasn't as efficient as you might have wanted him to be. If we're being honest, Jimmy Garoppolo was not as efficient either, but Trey Lance had a completion percentage of around 60% last year. Or it was just a little over 60%. I want to see that number kind of increase to the 65 to 70 range, similar to how he was in minicamp. But all reports so far this offseason have been positive. I know you've said that the 49ers are raving about Trey Lance behind the scenes as well, and they've had positive reports. So I think that he is going to answer the questions in due time.
So I was talking to someone who actually is at every Trey Lance throwing session. Um, and the funny part is, right? So I asked this person if I could share this, which they said of course. So I was talking to someone who was at every throwing session from Trey Lance, and I said, "Hey, so is this arm fatigue like a fuzz? Like what is it like? Is it serious? Is it something us fans have to worry about? Is it something that we need to be cautious about as an organization?" And they laughed. They're like, "What arm fatigue are people talking about? What arm fitness are they talking about? There is no arm fatigue. There absolutely is nothing." Like Trey Lance, from the first throw to the last throw of his session, and the next day, the first throw to the last day, and then the next day, the first to the last throw, he has the same velocity, he has the same accuracy, he has the same throwing motion. There is no arm fatigue. He does not get tired from throwing. So the thing is this is all a made up BS. And I was like, well, there is a quarterback on the roster who actually has arm fatigue. If you guys heard, I don't know if it was Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter, but he goes, the issue with Jimmy Garoppolo isn't being cleared. It's the ability to throw,
Yeah,
and then throw again to the next day, and then throw again the next day, and then throw again. What it sounds like to me is the quarterback that actually has arm fatigue on the 49ers roster is the quarterback coming off of shoulder surgery. And that's no knock against Jimmy Garoppolo, because when you're coming off shoulder, when you're coming off an injury, you're coming off like same thing when you go back to the gym, right? I started back at the gym. I go back to the gym. The first day I run a mile, I'm tired. Like I'm huffing and puffing. Same thing as if I was when I'm pumping. You feel you're not as strong. You're not there. And then the next day, right? You run a little bit faster. You're not as winded. Same thing with throwing a football. The first day you throw for Jimmy, it's going to hurt his shoulder. The next day you could throw maybe 3 more passes. Continue. That's arm fatigue. That's what arm fatigue is. Relearning how to throw and the natural motions that Jimmy's doing. So the quarterback that has arm fatigue is Jimmy, not Trey. Now I want to talk to you. What is a good camp for Trey Lance to look like, and what is a bad camp for Trey Lance look like?
I can start with the bad camp because it's in a way they're both tied in. Number one question for me is durability. I'm not talking about the arm, I'm just talking in general. How will the 49ers deploy Trey Lance with pads, especially because it's the first contact practices that they're going to have, right? How are they going to utilize them as a running threat? And will he get injured in this short time? Because one, it's not a knock against Trey Lance, but he didn't play very much last year, and he had 2 injuries. He had the finger injury, which wasn't obviously it's out of his control, but he had the finger injury, and then he had the knee sprain in his first start. So to me, those are the two injuries from last year. And so I want to see, can Trey Lance make it through the entire training camp and preseason without getting hurt? That raises more confidence going into the season, because with the amount of volume now that he's throwing as compared to last offseason, that will show me that he can handle the load really just from a body standpoint. And right now, we don't know that answer. He went through
So pretty
minicamp.
much so what you're saying is Trey Lance is injury prone?
I'm not saying Trey Lance is injury prone.
I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing.
I know. Although you can take it that way. But no, I think that if Trey Lance can just prove that he can be durable in this, like in a starting standpoint, I think that's a huge positive for this case. And obviously the one thing going in his favor, Niner by Nature points it out, he doesn't have an injury history, and both of his injuries were kind of out of his control in a way. So that to me is one thing. But a good Trey Lance camp will signify he's able to make the harder throws, the off the balance throws that he showed he was able to make last year. He's able to execute play action well. I want the 49ers to go back to more in that 30% range for play action plays, as opposed to their lower mid 20% range last year, because Lance was more comfortable in the play action during his collegiate days. And I also want to see how is the connection between him and the running backs? In the shotgun game, in the RPO game especially. I want to see if the 49ers are going to be running RPOs and how his mind kind of comes to thinking in those situations, because I think they're going to definitely run that more now that Lance is under center as opposed to Garoppolo.
So for me, what a bad camp looks like, since we started with bad camps, right? So for me, what a bad camp looks like is a camp that where he's struggling to throw the ball in terms of like the intermediate and deep range, like his accuracy isn't there. That's to me what it all comes down to, because when you have a head coach or offensive coordinator like Kyle Shanahan, you're given the answers to the test. You're given where to go with the ball in this kind of system.
Yeah.
And if I believe what Trey Lance is, I believe he's a smart quarterback, and I believe he's going to make the right throws and the right reads. But now, if he's having accuracy issues and he's missing those reads and not hitting who he's supposed to go to me, that's a bad camp, because Jimmy actually did stuff like that. He hit the open guy. He went to where Kyle wanted, and not necessarily did he complete the passes, but he threw to where Kyle wanted the ball to go to, and that's the biggest thing where that for me can make Trey Lance have a bad camp. Now, what does a good camp look like? A good camp looks like him actually being more comfortable in the pocket on a couple of throws that he had during preseason and during the regular season. If he takes a hitch one time, he has a guy wide open. If he throws a little bit of anticipation, he has guys like Brandon Ayuk wide open for a big game. So that's what I want to see. At last year's training camp, I got to see Trey Lance throw the ball in a controlled environment, because it was the way Kyle Shanahan would put him in. You could tell it was controlled, and he knew what was good, what the defense was calling, and he allowed him to go. I want to see Kyle Shanahan take the training wheels off, open up the entire offense that you have for him. Right, it's going to be a little bit of a different offense. You're going to see a little bit more play action heavy. I want him to use that RPO. But I also want him to make Trey Lance very uncomfortable. Put Trey Lance in situations that make him uncomfortable,
Yeah.
such as just regular drop back. Make him be a quarterback. Make him stay in the pocket. Don't let him roll out. When you roll, you know what he is when he rolls out. We know what he is. Let's see him develop in the pocket. To me, that's a good camp. If we could see Trey Lance do that, to me, that is a good camp. Not him throwing the 60-yard bumps. I know he could do that. We know he could do that. He did it last year. He was the better quarterback last year when I was at camp, and I was there for a few days. He was the much better quarterback in terms of letting the ball rip deep, throwing these play action across the field darts. He was the better quarterback. Now, where he struggled was the quarterback in terms of making the right read, because he got big play happy, and
Right.
that's where the young quarterbacks become either great quarterbacks or they stay as very good quarterbacks. And I think for Trey Lance, the ability to understand when to attack deep and when to take what the defense is giving you is going to be determining whether the 49ers offense become as a high motored offense or an average offense. And I think he's smart enough to understand, take what the defense gives you. I do want to shout out because we do have people in the chat, right? I do want to shout out No Border Sports, Niner by Nature. He said, "Great podcast, fellas." Kyle might let the defense get after Trey, and I think he should. I think he should. There's a good question here. So, right, we're gonna start going away from Trey and everything, because we know what Trey Lance, and that's gonna be some good conversations the next couple of weeks, especially the podcast we have coming. So this is a good question in my opinion, because Poe is an offensive lineman slash fullback slash he. I mean, he might be. He has like the body of a nose tackle and stuff like that, like 6 foot, 300 pounds. Do you think so? Could you see Poe making the 53-man roster as a chess piece and not just an offensive lineman? I'm gonna let you go first, because you might have a better explanation of it. So go ahead and you go first.
Yeah, so I mean, I can just start by looking at our current offensive line roster, right? And I understand the chess piece part, but if we're looking right now with the offensive line, we've got Trent Williams, we've got Jake Brendall, Daniel Brunskill, Mike McGlinchey, Aaron Banks. That's probably our starting five at the moment. Then we've got Jalen Moore, we've got Spencer Burford, we've got Nick Zakel, that's 8. And then we have Colton McKivitz and Justin Steele. I think that those are 10 offensive linemen right now that I just named that have a better shot of making the roster than Jason Poe. Why? Because they all played on a higher team than Jason Poe in camp or were injured. In minicamp or were injured. Jason Poe was the third team center, or I think he was a third team left guard actually. Now, I understand the chess piece part, but I think the 49ers are going to try and stash him on the roster just because there's not an immediate need for him right now. The versatility is good because he's an extremely well athlete. He could be a fullback, but to be utilized in such limited situations and also to have other better players currently on the roster, I don't see an instance where Jason Poe makes the 53-man roster. However, I can see him being stashed onto the practice squad for this season and then potentially making the roster as some of the veterans age out or get bigger contracts elsewhere. Him and Donovan West are pieces that I view as developmental guys for the next 2 to 3 years for the 49ers to potentially develop into parts of their offensive line rotation.
So I don't think he makes the roster at all. I think he's borderline practice squad guy. I think the 49ers did this to see if Poe could be a fullback slash offensive lineman that they could use, or even like a defensive lineman, an emergency guy, kind of like what the Baltimore Ravens use with Richard, with the defensive
Yeah,
lineman, defensive fullback, offensive fullback, and offensive
yeah,
guard. But I don't think Poe is as good as we all think. I would and no knock on him. He's made a heck of a career out of his size and everything. But I think the lack of size, the lack of um, where he is on the roster, I think there's a lot of guys on the roster who have a better chance than. For me, I'd rather have a guy who could play special teams, be stashed on the 53-man roster, because at least they give you that extra little piece to if you need him to play, they could play special teams. I don't really see Poe playing anywhere on special teams besides um, field goal units and stuff like that. But even then, like usually you use defensive linemen and offensive linemen for those units anyway. So I don't see him doing that. Um, I actually think Donovan West has a better chance to make the roster, and I don't even think Donovan West is going to make the roster. I think there's a
agreed.
lot of guys competing for offensive line positions on this roster. So for me, I would say no. Um, now for Poe, his best chance is to hope he balls out in preseason and the 49ers bring him back to the practice squad because we don't have a center for the future. Um, I know our fullback Kyle Youscheck. I don't know how much longer he'll be playing, and Poe could fit that. He could fit that mold, right? He could do that. He's that athletic. So I don't know on him making. I don't see him making the 53 man. Maybe the practice squad, but that's even pushing it for me. Going more into training camp, right? Since we're on the offensive line topic,
Mhm.
what is the most intriguing battle for the offensive line that you see? Is it center? Is it left guard, right guard? And we heard Michael Glitch is going to be ready, so that's really not a battle anymore. Everyone thought right tackle might be a battle for just in case Mike McGlinchey isn't ready. But we heard through and shout out to our boy Brad Graham, who interviewed Mike McGlinchey. So we heard he'll be up and ready to go. So what's the most intriguing camp battle for you?
Yeah, so for me personally, I think it's right guard. A lot of people might point to center, Jake Brendall being a career backup, but I personally have confidence in Brendall, more confidence than others in Brendall as our starting center for 2022. I've pointed out before his connection with Trey Lance stems to last year. Both of them worked together as the center quarterback relationship on the second team last year and on the scout team last year throughout the entirety of the year. So really, Trey Lance, the one guy that he's communicated with because Garoppolo worked with Mac, has been Jake Brendall. Brendall also is an athletic guy, one of the best athletes from his draft class, posting a 994 RAS score. He fits well in this system, and Trent Williams has also shared information about Jake Brendall, sharing positive information about Jake Brendall. And so to me, I think that the center spot in a way is locked up, not just because Jake Brendall is there, but also because of the point here. Right guard, I think, is where Daniel Brunskill currently slots in. I don't think he immediately competes for center because I think the 49ers will want to keep him at the same position he was last year to avoid any more roster turnover along the offensive line. So I think Brunskill and Jalen Moore is the big battle for me to see. Two intriguing candidates. I wouldn't mind if either one ends up starting at that right guard position. Jalen Moore was the one who was the first team guy while Brunskill was out with the knee tendonitis. Remember, Brunskill signed that 1 year, $2.54 million tender this offseason, which isn't guaranteed to my knowledge. And
It's
so,
not guaranteed.
yeah, it isn't guaranteed. So Daniel Brunskill, if the 49ers view him as a cap casualty, could be cut, although I view that as highly unlikely. To me, it is right guard. Jalen Moore or Daniel Brunskill, one of those two, I think, are the favorites to win it. And potentially, if Spencer Burford somehow has a great camp, might slot himself as well into a maybe not a starting role, but a prominent backup role.
So I think the 49ers, right? So you have the situation where like you right guard is a very big battle. Everyone's slotting in Aaron Banks at the left guard position, and I think it's safe to say Aaron Banks should start at left guard, right?
Mhm.
Going back to his natural position. I keep going back to center as being the biggest competition, and, and on the center on the offensive line, and only because that center connection with Trey Lance is going to be the most important part, right? Whether that's Nick Zakel, whether that's Donovan West, whether that's Jake Brendall, whoever's there at center, Daniel Brunskill is going to be the biggest key to this offensive line succeeding. Because the way Kyle Shanahan's offense runs, he needs a very smart center. He needs a very capable center. So for me, I'm more interested to see what Kyle does at that center position after
Mhm.
losing a guy like Alex Mack, who was a very key component to this offensive line. So for me, that's my biggest like focus on the offensive line. I think Jalen Moore should win the right guard battle. I remember talking to Brad Graham about Jalen Moore, telling him that I think Jalen Moore is in a battle at right guard. He didn't see
Yeah,
Jalen Moore as a
I
guard.
agree. Yeah.
Um, he didn't see Jalen Moore as a guard, but when I had watched the Senior Bowl, the year that Jalen Moore was there, when I was credentialed, I got all this practice film virtually, and I was able to see Jalen Moore compete at right guard. I liked what he saw, and I thought he was a better um, guard than he was tackle. I thought he was a natural guard. So I think this is going into his athletic ability and going to into what he does well. Now, I think Daniel Brunskill's biggest issue is that knee tendonitis. The knee tendonitis worries me. Um, for the center position, like you said, Jake Brendel is a very intelligent player. A lot of the 49ers offensive linemen will give him that praise of being the smartest guys in the room. Um, but now the thing is you could be the smartest guy in the room, but if you can't play, you can't play, right? Because
Mhm.
don't get me wrong, he has a very athletic ability, but what he's done in his career as a center isn't too intriguing, right? Like he hasn't really done much in terms of starting, but he also hasn't been given the ability to be a starter in the NFL. And I think that's one of the biggest things is getting the opportunities to start and getting the opportunities to showcase what you can do is very slim in the NFL. A lot of these players don't get the opportunity, and when they do, some of them shine. And I hear like Niner by Nature says Zakel is getting room for center. I think Zakel should start. Like Zakel is the better offensive lineman in terms of being a center. I think he should start. The 49ers staff in terms of scouting and everything, they all said they loved Zakel
Yeah. Alex
inside
Smith.
at center at the Senior Bowl. I believe he played a little bit of center, and
Mhm.
he showed the 49ers in the classroom how smart he was. So I don't think he'll have any worries on picking up the offense. So I think the center position is a very very intriguing battle for me to look at. Especially because we have a young quarterback. So you might go with the veteran Jake Brendel because he has the experience in the NFL
Yeah.
to actually help him out. So that's to me the more intriguing because of Trey Lance. If we had a veteran, if Trey Lance was in his third year, fourth year, I would say right guard, like you saying.
Yeah.
But with Trey Lance being in his first full year as a starter, to me that center position has to be hit. Like the 49ers have to choose the right center this season for Trey Lance.
And I
Um,
think that's a very good point that you make about like just because the center quarterback relationship is so important, especially for rookies, right? Because that's the guy who you rely on the most. And one interesting tidbit that I heard from Trey Lance during this past offseason was remember how Trey Lance called all of his protections back in NDSU. He was the one kind of in control of the offensive line, taking over that responsibility. Well, guess what? not only is he the smartest guy, or not only is he smart, but there are other smart guys. The guy we mentioned, Jake Brendall, in the room. Jake Brendall is actually the one who now calls all the protections on that San Francisco offensive line. The reason that I think he's more well equipped to potentially take that spot in 2022 is not only the connection with Lance that is sustained for a longer period of time and also has sustained this this offseason, but also just because that relationship there puts less stress on Lance, at least for 2022, before he gets time to develop himself and develop the rapport with Zakel for 2023.
No, and I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is hearing Jake Brendall was calling the protections already. Like that kind of shows like he's the front runner to win that starting center position. And
Mm-hmm.
I think he has the opportunity sitting behind Alex Mack and being mentored by Mack, right? And then like you said, you keep going on this, and this is something Rohan has said for a very long time, and I think it's a very very key component to this Jake Brendall, the offensive center position is Jake Brendall and Trey Lance have a rapport already, and that's the biggest thing between the quarterback and center position. Now we're gonna move a little bit, right? We're at the offensive line. We kind of know what's gonna happen at receiver with Deebo, Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, Danny Gray, missing the guy that we just signed this offseason.
Ray McLeod.
Ray McLeod. So we know what we have at receiver. So receiver, it's more intriguing because we have more talent there, but there's no real competition except for the sixth receiver spot, which isn't. No one wants to talk about the sixth receiver on a roster. And I know I don't. I don't know if you do, but if anyone in the comments wants to know about the sixth receiver, we could go ahead and talk about it. But I think we should get to defense. Now we have a loaded defensive line. We have a good linebacking core, a good connection at safety. That's going to be there's going to be a battle at safety. There's going to be a battle for the nickel corner spot. Well, what do you want to talk about first? We could talk about D line. We could talk about the linebacking core, safeties, or corners. What do you want to talk about, Rohan?
Let's go interior to exterior. So we can start with the line, branch out to the linebackers, and then branch out to the secondary. Because I've got interesting thoughts about all three. D line room. What are you thinking? What's like your original thought on it, and how do you think training camp is going to go for it?
I think there's a very, very deep defensive line, right? Like when you look at the defensive line, it's so deep. So we have a rookie Kalia Davis, Nick Bosa. We have guys like Drake Jackson, Hassan Ridgeway, Kimoko Ture, Jordan Willis, Javon Kinlaw, Arik Armstead. We have guys like Charles Omenihu, Kerry Hyder, Kevin Givens, Samson
Yeah.
Ebukam. I don't know if I said the rookie Kalia Davis. The D line's deep. It's very, very, very deep defensive line. Now, when we heard, I missed Maurice Hurst. Shout out to my guy Niners by nature. I missed we so deep. Like, I missed Hurst, and Hurst is a starting caliber defensive lineman. So like this defensive line is so deep. So I want to talk a little bit about. Oh, we did forget about the running back room, which we will go back and talk about after we do the defense. So the defensive line, like I said, bringing back Kerry Hyder was very pointless. Like I thought that was a stupid signing. I really did in the offseason. Why? Because all his sacks in 2019 or 2020 or whatever year the 49ers sucked and he got like 8 sacks or 10 sacks or whatever he got. They were all hustle sacks. Like literally they were all hustle and coverage sacks. Like I don't care what a player does when the back end is covering for 6 seconds. Like that's pointless to me. Get to the quarterback within the first 2 seconds of a snap, first 3 seconds of a snap, and disrupt an offensive play. He doesn't do that. So I think he's not going to make the team. And then we go to guys like Jordan Willis. We go to guys like Samson Ebukam, Maurice Hurst, Charles Omenihu, Hassan Ridgeway, Kamoko Ture. Like that's where the battle gets deep. And like this is the depth, like the depth of everything, right? Now, I think Kamoko Ture should make the roster just because he provides that speed off the edge. He provides that speed that the 49ers defensive line is missing, just like Drake Jackson does, right? Drake Jackson provides that speed. I think Jordan Willis is a special teams guy. Now, I think he's a fringe guy to make the roster along with Kerry Hyder. I think D Ford gets cut. I don't think D Ford makes the roster. I mean, when can he stay healthy? Like the thing
Yeah.
is if he's never been healthy, he can't stay healthy. Now you got to prove you're healthy. You got to prove you still have that speed, that get off, that elite get off. I don't think he could be healthy. Cut him. Stay healthy. Stay young. Get guys on the field that could actually play. Now, a player I'm really excited about, but I know he's not going to be ready, is Kalia Davis the first couple weeks. I'm really excited about Kalia Davis, Kevin Givens, and Maurice Hurst inside. Now, the 49ers usually keep 10 defensive linemen, right? So 10 to 9 defensive linemen. So I'm going to name roughly my 9 to 10. So I'm going to go obviously Nick Bosa, Arik Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, Drake Jackson, that's 4, Charles Omenihu, Hassan Ridgeway, which is 6, Kamoko Ture, which is 7, and then you have a little battle, right, for 8 and 9. Did I say Hassan Ridgeway in that 7?
Yeah, you did. You did.
So that's the 7. So you have a battle between Jordan Willis, Kerry Hyder, Maurice Hurst, Kevin Givens. I think Kevin Givens makes it because of his versatility. I think he can play inside and outside. I think Maurice Hurst makes it because he is a very strong inside guy. So I think Kerry Hyder and Jordan Willis get cut, and it's gonna hurt some fans because Jordan Willis was a very big fan. The fan base loves Jordan Willis for what he did against Green Bay. The
Mhm.
block punt that saved the 49ers season going forward, right? So it's gonna hurt seeing him leave, but it's the best thing to do. I think if you keep the defensive linemen as deep as you possibly can, if you keep the 10, I think that 10 that I just named is a very deep group, and I think they could possibly have more sacks than the 49ers did last year and even in 2019 when they went to the Super Bowl. I think this is a very deeper defensive line than the 49ers had in 2019. And I think it's going to be a very dangerous defensive line. Um, this is a great question, right? This is right here. This is the question of the day. Niner by nature. Do the 49ers keep 11 or 12 defensive linemen with how deep the D line is? Who do you could you put someone on the IR potentially to make the 53 to stash someone for later in the season? Like, what do you do there, right?
Yeah.
So
And
I want to hear what you had to say because you said you had some interesting things about that D line.
right. So Niner by nature brings up a good point. How many do we keep? Last year was an anomaly. We kept 11 defensive linemen on the original
Mm-hmm.
53-man roster. And I mean, I understand that Maurice Hurst was put on IR and things, but we brought 11 on the 53-man roster. I don't think we can afford to put 11 on the 53 this year because of extreme depth that we have at other positions. We only carried 5 cornerbacks last year. I think we're going to carry 6 cornerbacks this year. And I think we're also going to carry 4 running backs this year outside of Kyle Juszczyk, meaning that I don't think there's room for 11 defensive linemen. And so when we talk about the 10, you bring up good points. I don't think Kerry Hyder makes the roster. It's just because his age doesn't make sense with the current timeline of the 49ers defensive
Be
line.
real. Be real. It's not the age. He's not good,
It's also
Rohan.
it's the
He's not.
production, but
He's not good. Like I
you're right.
get the age, like the age factor and everything, but like he's just not good. Like
Yeah.
I could see if he's like an older guy who's like 30, 31, who's good. But when you're not good and you don't have a legit get off and like he's not good. Like the 49ers, that was a dumb signing. It was just more so like a depth, a camp body. That's what I saw. It's dumb signings.
Yeah, and we'll talk about one camp body in a minute. But if I think we keep 10, and I think that 10 ends up being Arik Armstead, Nick Bosa, Ebukam, Omenihu, Willis, Kevin Givens, Maurice Hurst, Kinlaw, Ridgeway, and Drake Jackson. That is the 10 that I believe will be on the
No
roster.
Charles Omenihu?
I named Omenihu, I think, right?
Oh, you did? You did? I didn't hear. My bad if I didn't hear him. But I know who you're talking about. Camp body. You're talking about Robert. Robert. I don't want to say his
Yeah,
last. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know what I mean. He played decent last year. He played solid last year. I think he's much better than Kerry Hyder. Like he's better inside than Kerry Hyder.
Mhm.
Now when he came out, he was supposed to be like this super stud,
The
this
number
super
one high
athlete.
school recruit in his class.
Yeah, and
He was
like
good. Yeah.
he's still young. That's the thing. He's still young. He's a big guy, 6'4". He could be a defensive tackle in the system and plug the nose at the same time. Like so, but I do think he's a camp buddy. Like, I mean, when you're that late of a signing, I think it's just, hey, let's kick the tires on a guy who played solid last year with the Seattle Seahawks. In 2018, he had 4.5 sacks. This guy is more so a run defender than anything, and I think it could possibly be to see if guys like Javon Kinlaw, like, and no, this is not a disrespect to anyone, like to Javon Kinlaw or anything, but like we know Javon Kinlaw has a knee issue, the knee tendonitis. He got fixed, but let's say out of nowhere, late into the camp, something starts happening with one of the interior defensive linemen. I think you could cut Rob, and then bring him back and put that guy
Right.
that was having any injuries onto the IR. But you could bring something like that. But I do think he is a camp body. So I wanted to hear from you because you said you had some interesting takes on that. So go ahead.
Yeah, and Nick Ndiche, like at least this late, right? It was very interesting for this signing. Immediately, my first thought isn't Nick Ndiche gets signed. My first thought is who's getting cut? Because to my belief, the 49ers have 90 players on their roster, not including Alex Mack, but including Alfredo Gutierrez. But I think he still counts as a spot. I think he counts
He
on the
does.
90 man, right?
From what I was told, no, I didn't. Because he doesn't count on the 53 because he's an international player.
Right. He doesn't
So I
count on
don't
the
think he.
practice squad. I think what it is he's a practice squad exemption. He doesn't count on the 16-person practice squad. But to my belief, I thought he counts on the 90-man roster. If he doesn't, then the 49ers have an extra spot. But this to me kind of signaled that the 49ers might finally be cutting D forward. I thought that this was like a 1-for-1 swap essentially on that defensive line. I think earlier this offseason, we heard that D Ford was coming in for a physical. I don't think he passed that physical because he hasn't been cut yet. And Kyle Shanahan has said multiple times, just bluntly, I don't think D Ford is going to be with our team this season. So I do think that the 49ers will eventually move on from D Ford. I think Nick Ndiche is a camp body for the most part. And your analysis is very interesting, right? In that if a person, one of those 10 top defensive linemen, if one of them gets injured, they can go on IR. You have another guy that you can replace with them when the season begins, who you can release and bring back on the 53-man roster after placing the other guy on IR. So I do think that does make sense if that happens. But at the moment, I do think Nick Ndiche is a camp body. It's just interesting at a position that the 49ers already have so much talent at. If they're not doing a 1-for-1 defensive line swap, you have 17 defensive linemen on the roster. You're now making it 18. And so it does intrigue me a bit because the 49ers have gotten Kalia Davis, they've gotten Kevin Gibbons, Mo Hurst, Kinlaw, Ridgeway, and they still have Darian Daniels and Kevin Atkins. That's 8 defensive linemen currently on their roster. Now, obviously, not all of those 8 are going to make the roster, but Nick Ndiche makes it 9. And so that's a ton of defensive tackles that you have currently on the roster for a team that likes to be versatile and rotate.
You know what it also tells me, Rohan? It also tells me that Kyle Shanahan plans on doing a lot more one-on-ones
Mm-hmm.
and situations with that defensive line group, right? Like you have a lot of offensive linemen that are going to be competing for jobs. You got a lot of defensive linemen competing for jobs. So what does that mean? It means there's going to be a very, very big camp battle between the offensive and defensive lines. They're going to be going at it for a good while. You're going to see more than normally they'll do like 5 reps or 4 reps of one-on-ones each. I think we're going to see a lot of one-on-ones, especially because you have guys at right guard, left guard, center, swing tackle trying to make the roster. So you're going to have a lot more one-on-one situations that the 49ers could do because of the depth at defensive line and offensive line. And it's very key to do that because you get to see what they actually are. So I think that's something we're going to see a little bit more during this camp. Now going to linebacker, right? Because the defensive line is so deep and everything. Like you're going to eventually have all these guys. So talk to me about linebackers. We have Aziz Al-Shaair, Oren Burks, Demetrius Flanagan-Foles. I believe the 49ers have a rookie from North Carolina,
Yep.
Jeremiah, I believe. I think that's his first name.
Yeah.
They have Drake Greenlaw. They have obviously the legendary Fred Warner. They have I think his last name is Ball. He's a rookie out of Indiana.
McCrary Ball.
Um,
Yeah.
they have a rookie from San Diego State, and they have Curtis Robinson from Stanford. a lot of linebackers this year, right? More than they usually have in camp.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the linebacking group because I know you have opinions on that linebacking group. I know everyone has opinions on Dre Greenlaw and Aziz Al-Sayer. Like everyone wants to put them and compete them.
Right.
And then it's we should before we even say this, like before we even start talking about the linebacking group, I think it's important to note that it is important. That is an important battle between Aziz and Dre Greenlaw because the 49ers aren't in their base down situation that much, right? They're usually in their nickel or dime packages more often than a base. Like the NFL has gone out of their base packages more. So whoever wins that battle between the linebackers is going to be on the field more often. So whether Aziz Al-Shaair or Dre Greenlaw is on the field, the pass coverage for those two does not drop. Like it doesn't. They're really close in terms of being good pass coverage. I don't think one's better than the other. Now, in run defense, we could argue that there's someone better than the other. So, talk to me about the linebackers because I do want to say like that is actually an important battle that we actually got to talk about too eventually.
Right. And when we talk about the linebackers, early part of the offseason, good portion of those linebackers were injured. Aziz Al-Shaair was injured, coming off of shoulder surgery, and I think it was knee surgery, knee tendonitis, if I'm not mistaken. But it was two surgeries that he had this earlier this offseason after the season. Fred Warner was dealing with some lower body issues, so he didn't participate in mandatory minicamp. So you had a lot of these younger guys kind of getting more reps. One name that standed out, according to Grant Cohn, was Curtis Robinson, who I think had an interception and also played pretty well during the early part of the offseason. I think that could be a name to keep an eye on. But to me, I think this linebacker battle is going to be very interesting. We have four solidified linebackers on the roster. Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Aziz Al-Shaair, and Warren Burks, who we signed to a 2-year deal this past offseason. I think those four are locks to make the roster, and I don't think that either of Greenlaw or Aziz Al-Shaair will be let go this offseason. However, there's a fifth linebacker that a lot of people like, myself included. I'm a pretty big fan of him. Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles is entering his third year in the NFL, meaning next year he is a restricted free agent, having acquired 3 years of service already, meaning he's going to get that 1 year, $2.5 million tender, $2.59 million to be exact, that Dre Greenlaw got this past offseason because he was a restricted free agent. Are the 49ers going to pay $2.5 million for their fifth linebacker on the roster, a guy who they haven't necessarily seen as a pass coverage guy despite his athleticism? They've seen him primarily as a special teamer. How do I know that? Marcel Harris last year was a safety converted to linebacker, had minimal linebacker experience, and obviously wasn't a great safety. Yet he played more defensive snaps than Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, played 36% of the defensive snaps. Flannigan-Fowles only played 15% of the defensive snaps. Flannigan-Fowles is a special team standout. I think he can earn interest from other teams, and the 49ers might potentially trade him. I've been hammering this point this offseason. The 49ers might trade Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. What did they do last offseason? Jonas Griffith, an undrafted rookie. They got a 6th-round pick for an undrafted rookie. And Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles has more on his track record, one of the better special teams linebackers in the NFL, and has played at that capacity for now 2 straight NFL seasons. So to me, I think that he is the guy who they might trade and give one of those undrafted rookies who've shown promise in their collegiate careers and could also show promise in this training camp period a shot. My favorite is UNC's Jeremiah Gale.
So, man, you said Jonas Griffith, man. Last year, Jonas Griffith in camp, he looked very good. He was solid. He was when I was there watching him, I thought he was going to make the roster. And when they traded him, I was like, whoa, I thought he was going to make the roster over Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. I do agree with you in terms of Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles potentially being traded because or even Greenlaw because the next year he'll be, I believe, he's an unrestricted free agent. So you could trade one of the guys, right? If potentially one of the, like, let's say Dre Greenlaw loses the battle to Aziz Al-Shaair. I believe Aziz has more team control. I believe he has a little bit more team control than Dre Greenlaw. So you could kind of control his contract for the next couple of years because I think he was on a 10-year. So I don't know if next year he is a restricted free agent, which kind of gets interesting. Or no, I think they're both unrestricted. But so that's something that we have to look out for as well. But I think
Yeah, both
the
are
situation.
unrestricted.
So the thing with the linebacking position, so those two are unrestricted. So you could potentially have to trade one of them because you might have to sign one of those to a bigger contract. Um, but like we were saying, right, the the linebacking core, Jeremiah Jamel, I don't know if say his last name, but Jamel, and the guy out of San Diego State. No, was it
Megan,
San Diego State or
Megan Ullaby, yeah.
I might be him. Oh, I forgot who I was watching the other day. No, I think it
Is
was
it
the guy from Indiana. I think it
Prairie
was the
Ball?
guy. Yeah. I think it was a McCary Ball. But all three of those guys are athletic guys. But now, when we talk about Curtis Robinson, right?
Mhm.
Curtis Robinson is also a fairly decent athlete himself. So, what reason why I'm bringing him up is because he's already starting to shine in OTAs and stuff like that. He's starting to do what Jonas Griffith did. This
Mhm.
guy is starting to shine into this athletic no, I shouldn't say athletic specimen, but Jonas Griffith jumped off the screen as an athlete. So did Curtis Robinson coming out of college. He was one of those guys that a lot of people were like, "Wow, he's an athletic guy. He was a 5-star recruit coming out." Now, for me, I think he has a better chance than the other guys because he has a year a year of service under his belt. So he has he understands the way the NFL systems work, how what to look for. He knows the speed of the game. So I think he has an advantage over the rookies, which is kind of good because you could stash one of those rookies on the practice squad like the 49ers have done in years of past, right? They did that with Aziz Al-Shaair, I believe, one year. They did that with Demetrius Flannigan-Foles one year. So you could stash guys on the practice squad, and you could do that with I don't know, say it's Jermel. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah, Gemmel.
Gemmel. So you could do that with Gemmel, stash him on the practice squad, and have Curtis Robinson as a fifth linebacker. Um, I really like Curtis Robinson's athletic frame and his athletic speed. He's a quick burst from what I've seen. He's very lengthy. Now you put him on special teams. You allow him to be a gunner. You allow him to do his thing on special teams. I think he could succeed alongside Oren Burks.
Yeah.
Now, if you have him on the 53 man, you have to get rid of someone, right? You have to get rid of either Demetrius Flannigan-Foles because or Dre Greenlaw or Aziz. Does one of them get traded? I think the 49ers would be very wise to trade one of those guys.
Mhm.
Why? Because you have team control over Curtis Robinson. You have control
Exactly.
over Oren Burks. Fred Warner is going to be here for the long term. So if they're not going to be playing much, and like I said, the base package isn't really in the NFL anymore. NFL teams don't use their base package, so you could potentially trade someone who's not going to be on the field much, anyways. And if someone has to replace a guy like Dre Greenlaw or Aziz Al-Shaair, it would be Oren Burks, right? Who was an athletic guy who was known for his athleticism coming out of college, is known for his athleticism with the Green Bay Packers. So for me, we're looking here, right? And we're talking about all this situation. The battle between Dre Greenlaw and Aziz Al-Shaair can dictate which player could possibly be traded. Now, Rohan and I aren't saying that someone's going to for sure they're going to be traded, but
Mhm.
we're saying there's a very high possibility that one of those guys who loses that battle could eventually be traded just because of team control. They're both going to be unrestricted free agent. The 49ers likely don't extend both of them next year, re-sign both of them next year. So to me, that is also an intriguing camp battle. Who wins that second linebacker spot? Third person could be the odd man out.
Yeah, and I think one thing when we talk about Curtis Robinson, there's something that the 49ers recently have liked out of their linebackers. It's this hybrid ability, the safety linebacker ability. You showed it with Marcel Harris last year, who thrived a little more in the role when he was positioned more as a linebacker than a safety. Curtis Robinson has that hybrid ability. So does Segun Olabi with his athleticism, as well as Marcelino McCrary-Ball, who's a somewhat of a hybrid player at Indiana. So I think that that is an interesting battle between those three players potentially for that last spot. If the 49ers are looking for a guy that prefers that type of build. One thing though that you said is very important: team control. The 49ers don't have team control on Alshire or Greenlaw past this season, nor do they on Demetrius Flannigan. Well, they have a restricted offer for Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles, but that's $2.5 million. Curtis Robinson will have an exclusive rights free agent deal at the end of this year, meaning he's only going to make $825,000 at the end of this year, which won't crack the top 51 contracts for the 49ers. So he essentially won't count against the cap for both this year and next year. He has an extra year of team control, as do the undrafted free agents. So that's where I think the intrigue is for the undrafted free agents. And for that fifth linebacker spot, the last thing I'll say is they have talent linebacker. They've got the top three guys, and Oren Burks has played a limited capacity with Green Bay at the linebacker position as well. I think what they should look for is more so, rather than a guy who is a playmaker or maybe more of a linebacker, a more polished linebacker, I think they should look more for that Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles type of replacement, meaning a special teams gunner, a guy with good athleticism who they can develop into a good linebacker as well. And the 49ers have shown they can do that under Miko Ryans.
And I think the big thing, like you said, right, the 49ers have like this thing they look for in linebackers: tall, lengthy, athletic linebackers who could play safety, like play that safety / linebacker role. Because Curtis Robinson does play more like of a safety than a linebacker. When I noticed the 49ers like these linebackers that over pursue and are shooting like flying missiles, right? Look at Dre Greenlaw. Look at Azeez Al-Shaair. They miss these tackles because they're over pursuing and they're shooting down and they're trying to just create havoc on these offensive linemen and running backs and stuff like that. Fred Warner does the same exact stuff, but he's under control. And I think Curtis Robinson, I'm not saying Curtis Robinson could be like the next Dre Greenlaw, the next Azeez Al-Shaair, but I'm saying he could be the next Azeez Al-Shaair. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think, like, I'm not saying he's going to be that good, but he has the potential. He has the athletic ability to be that good. And I think, in my opinion, I think he makes the 53-man roster. I really do. When you're a 4-4-6 guy, you're a 4-4 guy, and you play that fast, and you play to this ability where you could play a linebacker, you could play a tight end, you could cover a tight end, you cover a running back out of the backfield. You can also fly down the field on punt coverage and kickoff coverage. That's something that is valuable to have on a team, especially a 49ers linebacking crew who loves that athletic ability and loves that versatility to play special teams and that kind of role. Transitioning, because we're already talking about linebacker safety hybrids, right? So it makes sense to just go straight to the safeties. Talk to me about, I mean, everyone knows Jimmy Ward, complete lock, starting safety, potential all-pro year, potential Pro Bowl year. Like, he's that kind of caliber guy. So there's not really talking about Ward. We know what he is. He deserves his credit. He deserves his praise and flowers, but not today because we're doing a little bit of camp, right? We have guys on the roster like Talanoa Hufanga. We have guys on the roster like Tarvarius Moore. We have guys like Leon O'Neal, George Odom. We have Taylor Hawkins. Am I missing anyone? I'm missing UCLA guy. Oh, what's his name?
Quantrez Knight.
Quantrez Knight.
He's the other guy. Yeah.
That's it, right?
Yep. I think that's pretty much the safety room.
Oh, I mean, I guess we could throw Dante Johnson in that room, right? I mean,
actually, you're right, because Dante Johnson has been lining up at free safety this entire offseason.
So let's talk about it. So that's a perfect point to talk about. Dante Johnson lining up at free safety, right? So that's someone that Rohan has been talking about as a safety guy. And I don't know who Rohan be talking to, man, but Rohan be talking to a lot of people. I know Rohan a little connected. The way he's been talking about certain guys and stuff like that, especially Dante Johnson. And then next thing you know, Dante Johnson comes out and he's rolling with the free safeties, like rolling and starting there and getting a lot of reps. Talk to me about Dante Johnson and what he means to this team, because we know 100% Dante Johnson is one of those guys who's willing to be cut and come back at the same guaranteed price in order to stash someone to the IR. So talk to me about Dante Johnson real quick.
Right, and I'll real quick talk about the contract point because that's kind of my expertise. You talk about Dante Johnson, he's a veteran now. He has the years of experience, so he essentially has just a guaranteed contract with the 49ers because when you get cut as a veteran, I think it's with 3+ years of experience, you don't go on waivers. You just go straight to the free agent pool, and then you can be brought back up. So Dante Johnson will likely not make the 53-man roster. originally, but whenever all the IR business and PUP business is all handled, Dante Johnson will probably come back on the roster. That's how you can probably roster 11 guys or 12 guys as defensive linemen, because Kalia Davis likely will not start the roster healthy. He'll probably start on the PUP list or on the IR list, one of the two lists, and then that will allow you to bring a roster spot back. But Dante Johnson, I think I was clamoring earlier in the offseason that he should be one of the candidates at safety this offseason with the uncertainty at the safety position opposite of Jimmy Ward. And what do we know? In minicamp, Dante Johnson has been the backup free safety to Talanoa Hufanga. Talanoa Hufanga has been the starter, but Johnson has been getting all of his reps at free safety this offseason. When we talk about the safety group, I think that depending on what you consider Johnson, will you consider him a cornerback or a safety? There will be 4 to 5 guys that will end up making the roster. There are a ton of exciting undrafted free agents. However, I don't know if many of those undrafted free agents will end up making the roster. There is one guy that I think of this current bunch that many expect to make the roster that I believe could be cut. That's Tarvarius Moore. I'm not as high as others on Tarvarius Moore. I think that especially because he's got the $825,000 contract without any guaranteed money or minimal guaranteed money, I think Tarvarius Moore could be a cut candidate this year, especially because I believe he's a restricted free agent next year, meaning you have to pay more for him. Instead, you could get a guy on with team control like Quantrez Knight, who's also been a guy who's popped up just a little bit in minicamp. He caught an interception off Brock Purdy. I remember that. And he has the ball skills that the 49ers have lacked in the secondary for years. I think that is something that you could potentially develop on the side as a backup safety. But right now, I think the locks are Jimmy Ward, and I think the lock is Talanoa Hufanga. I think both of those guys will end up starting week 1.
No, you forgot about George Odom. He's a lock, right?
Sorry, that's my third guy right here. George Odom is also a lock, just based on the contract he got, and also because he's a special teams ace. The coaches have raved, especially our special teams coach Brian Schneider said he was that one guy that I wanted in the secondary, and the 49ers went and got him. So those 3 I think are locks. I think that you could probably carry one other guy not named Dante Johnson. And to me, I think that guy could be Quantrez Knight if he shows out in training camp. It could also be Taylor Hawkins of San Diego State. I think those 2 definitely have a fair shot to push Tarvarius Moore because you have the team control on them. And because Moore is coming back from an ACL injury, he also wasn't very spectacular when he was on the field prior to that injury. And there are other players there. So why not see if you can develop a different type of safety with one of these 2 guys?
So you don't think Leon O'Neal will make the roster? I mean, a lot of people think he'll make the roster at coming out of Texas A&M. Highly. A lot of people thought he was highly recruited, or not highly recruited, but like one of those guys coming out who should be drafted like the top 3 rounds. You don't think he has a shot at making that roster, or how's that work?
Now, I'm not the biggest Leon O'Neal fan. I know you aren't either, and it's nothing against Leon O'Neal. I think that his confidence, his courage, all of that is what is needed from a defensive back. I just think other players have a better shot at what the 49ers want from their safeties. I think Quantrez Knight is more athletic. I think that Taylor Hawkins also is more athletic, and I think both of them are more versatile than Leon O'Neal. Leon O'Neal could be seen as a linebacker safety hybrid, which is why I suggest that the 49ers should place him on their practice squad, potentially develop him as one of those linebacker safety hybrids where he could get more playing time in the future. But I think right now, Hawkins and the guy that I mentioned, Quantrez Knight, have more athleticism, are more versatile. They could slot in at cornerback as well, while also playing safety. I think that versatility could be important for the 49ers, hence what we've seen from Dante Johnson over his time in San Francisco. I think that they just provide more upside, and I think that they have a likelier chance to be claimed if they were cut from the 49ers.
So I think I agree with you. So we have like the 3 locks, right? Last year, 49ers had 4 safeties make their 53-man roster. They had Jaquaski Tart, Talanoa Hufanga, and Tavon Wilson alongside Jimmy Ward, right? Tart was out, so Tart was, I believe, placed on the IR, and then Wilson was inserted to like that, kind of like that starting safety, backup safety role, I believe, to start the season. I don't know how like.
Yeah, Tart had a foot injury, I think, at the early part of camp. I don't know if he missed one, but I
don't think he was placed on the IR, but he like had that injury, right?
Right. Yeah. And you definitely, you're right, because we had the Tavon Wilson, George Kittle kind of talk. Remember when them two were going one-on-one, George Kittle praising Tavon Wilson, that kind of training camp hero like a Trent Sherfield on the defensive side.
So that safety room. I think I agree with you. Quantress Knight is the better safety than Leon O'Neal. Now, I think Leon O'Neal provides something similar to what Talanoa Hufanga provides, that near the box, that get down the hill kind of roll, right? So you have that similar aspects. And I don't think the 49ers want to bring a similar player to Talanoa Hufanga onto the roster, because if you look at George Odom, right?
Exactly.
He's similar to Talanoa Hufanga. He's better suited along the line of scrimmage and in that intermediate range. So George Odom is a pretty much similar player to Talanoa Hufanga is what I'm trying to say. So if anything, they need a more so of a free safety. So that insert Tarvarius Moore, insert Quantress Knight, those guys that are more so free safeties rather than a strong safety guy. And I think Tarvarius Moore has the edge because he knows the system. So he has the athletic ability. Now, he did tear his Achilles last year, which was very sucked, because I thought he was going to be a very impactful player on the roster. I still think he can be because of his athletic ability. But I think he's always had this mindset where he overreacts. He's one of those guys who reacts way too fast, and that's where he gets beat. So I'm excited to see him in camp, because if he could mature and he could do what he's supposed to do and keep things in front of him, I think the 49ers could potentially have a trio of safeties in Talanoa Hufanga, Tarvarius Moore, and Jimmy Ward, and they could continue to do what they did last year and have Tarvarius Moore and Talanoa Hufanga be that cover two role where you move Jimmy Ward inside and you have this presence of him taking away Cooper Kupp kind of deal, right? So the camp battle for that last safety spot is intriguing, because you have a lot of rookies like Quantress Knight, Leon O'Neal, who have potential. You also have Taylor Hawkins, who has potential. So you have a lot of potential in rookies, but then you have a guy coming off injury who 49ers drafted in the 3rd round, right? They drafted this guy because they thought he could be a starting caliber safety, and then he goes down with an injury when it was going to finally be his year to start, right? He was going to start potentially over a guy like Jaquaski Tartt. Like that was the plan, and then he tears that Achilles. So I think I'm going to go on record, and I'm going to say I really do think Tarvarius Moore makes the roster. I do think he makes the roster. Now, you said you believe it's going to be Quantress Knight. And I don't see nothing wrong with that. I think Quantress Knight is very capable. But if you look at what you and I both actually did, right? We looked for the more athletic guy who could actually play free safety instead of the guy similar to Talanoa Hufanga, who was, in our opinion, a lock, as well as George Odom, a lock near the line of scrimmage safeties, which is they're more strong safeties than anything. Or you could have them play. You could have them play that rover, that kind of role. Felt like they could be that near the line of scrimmage behind, like they could play deep.
Yeah.
They could play, so that's kind of similar to what Jaquaski did. Now, talk to me about what this secondary is missing at the safety position, right? Because we see Ward not get enough credit. We see a lot of these players in our secondary, Jaquaski Tartt. I wasn't a huge fan of him. I might have over criticized him, but I don't think he's as great as he was given credit for. But what's this safety tandem missing that could make this defense take it to the next level?
I think there are two things that have plagued the safety tandem, or not only the safety, but just the secondary from getting the respect that they deserve. It's ball production and it's durability. Those are two issues that have plagued this 49er secondary for a while. I mean, we've seen the issues with
shoot. I just got a text message to check the Toronto Blue Jays and the Boston Red Sox score.
Yeah.
Dude, 25-3 in the oh jeez. Sorry to stop the broadcast.
That is worth stopping. 25.
Dude, that's some kind of baseball. That's a baseball that I would like to watch, just because of the fact that the Toronto Blue Jays are putting it on the Boston Red Sox. That's an interesting score. But my bad,
Wait,
Rohan.
so
Sorry to stop you.
do they got like position players pitching or what? But
They have to at this point, right? When you're down that much, at this point, just start throwing your position players.
yeah, but what I was talking about is ball production and durability have been the two issues. I think that has been what's plagued the 49ers in the secondary, right? We've seen the Jaquaski Tart durability issues. Manuel Mosley missed 6 games last year, some in the beginning of the season, some at the end of the season. Jimmy Ward has had durability issues in the beginning of his career, right? And so that's been one thing. But the other thing was the ball production part. And I think that's where Quantrez Knight fits in. But the most important part, like you said, is the athleticism. We've got two molds of that hybrid safety type of role who play better near the line of scrimmage, becoming more popular in today's NFL, and that is our guy Talanoa Hufanga, who I think we both think will start, and also the guy we just mentioned in George Odom, two locks to make the roster. Both work very well in that role, and both also can play special teams to a capacity. So I think that they fit in that place. But you need a guy over the top because Jimmy Ward is versatile as well. In the past 2 seasons, he's played over 400 snaps over the top. He's played 200 snaps in the slot, and he's played 200 snaps elsewhere as well. Just he moves around a lot. He plays in the box, he plays in the slot, he plays over the top. And so you need someone to be able to cover over the top when Jimmy Ward is spending those extra 400 snaps not over the top. And that's where I think you need that athletic guy. You need a guy who can cover, and you need a guy who has ball production skills.
And even then, like if you have another athletic guy, it gives you the opportunity. And I think George Odom is athletic. I think he is a
Yeah.
guy who's capable of playing that free safety role as well. So like he's more of a, I think he's more of an in between of an athletic free safety to a strong safety. Like he could do either or, but I think he's more suited as strong safety. I think he's more comfortable there. But it allows you to do more in the secondary because if you do want, if the 49ers with D'Amico Ryan, what he did last year, he threw 3 safeties on the field, Tart, Ward, and Hufanga, and he allowed Tart and Hufanga to be that cover 2 safeties up top, and he put Jimmy Ward down low on Cooper Kupp and stuff like that when they had the elite receivers inside the slot. So you could also do that. But going into the corners, it's a lot longer podcast, and I love it because we're actually very great content talking about these camp battles that we're intrigued with, and kind of eventually it's going to be a 53 man roster prediction, and then stuff like that. So it's very good. I think very good content that we had going on right now today. Talk about the secondary, right? Going into the corners, we have a lot of rookies at the cornerback position, right? We have Samuel Womack. We have Tariq Castro Fields, right? I believe we have one more. I don't think he's a rookie, but he's a young guy.
Oh, you're saying Lenore?
No. He's from like Toledo. Not Womack. Not Womack. Is another.
Are you saying a rookie, like an undrafted?
No, he's not a rookie. He's like I want to say he's like his second year into the league.
Kadar Holman?
Yeah, Kadar Holman. So those 3 guys, like those are young cats who haven't really made a roster. And then we have Ambry Thomas, Domino Lenore, Emmanuel Mosley, Charvarius Ward, who I think was a phenomenal signing. Is going to be a cornerback 1. You have Jason Verret. Any guys I'm missing, Rohan?
Yeah. So we talk. You talk about Ward. You talk about Lenore, Holman, Womack, Verret. Who else? I mean, Ambry Thomas. Yeah, I think those are most of the guys. Yeah.
So last year, the 49ers, right, by the position, they kept 6 corners.
Correct.
My 6 corners, I think they're making the roster. Emmanuel Mosley, Charvarius Ward are the first 2 locks. Those are locks. Jason Verrett should make the roster if he is healthy. Samuel Womack makes the roster. That's 4 right there. And I think it's going to be a battle for 5 and 6. I think Tariq Castro Fields could potentially make the roster because I think he's a good guy good candidate to be not practice squad, but IR candidate, and then move to safety and like have him work out that safety. I think he is a decent potential safety. Ambry Thomas and Demo, right? So I think Ambry Thomas makes the roster, so that's 5. And I think ends up becoming a battle for the 6th spot. And I think you could end up going with a guy like Tariq Castro Fields or Demo, but Denomino Lenore, he struggled last year. He's struggling this year, going into OTAs and mandatory camp and everything like that. So what ends up happening with the corner situation, right? We know we've talked about who we want on the field. We want Charvarius Moore. We want not Avery Thomas, Emmanuel Mosley, and we want Jason Verret. So those are the three guys we want on the field, right? Like, but that's the ideal cornerback position. Now, if Jason Verret isn't healthy, then do you make the roster? Like, do you try to stash him on the roster? Do you cut him? Like, what do you do if Jason Verret isn't fully healthy coming out of camp?
I think there are two players that I really am not worried about because I think they'll end up being 49ers. That's Verret and that's Dante Johnson because both of them have the accrued amount of service. So if you cut them, you can just bring them back. I don't think Verret gets cut. I think that Dante Johnson won't make the initial roster because of IR, like just to move people to IR, and then we'll end up making the roster eventually. But when you talk about the six corners, I think that both of them will end up being 49ers on the 53 man when it's all said and done. It is interesting. I think the battles are interesting.
My question to that is that, like, right? So you say you're not worried about Jason Verret, but like when we talk about Jason Verret, wouldn't a team rather sign Jason Verret away from the 49ers, knowing that he could potentially be Jason Verret, the healthy Jason Verret, right? Like they could also stash him on their IR if they sign him to a guaranteed contract, right? So like a team could come up to Jason Verret if he gets come like, hey, we'll give you $2 million guaranteed if you sign with us, and then we could stash you on our IR because it's after the 53 man official 53 man. Give him a few more weeks to get healthy, and then bring him in during the middle of the season. So are you not worried that a team would do that, or do you think a team could potentially do that?
I think if a team was going to do that, they'd have done it already. Jason
But
Verret
the thing
had
is, though, with Jason Verret, though, and this is a good conversation because Jason Verret, before a team could have did that, right? But he was coming off of, I believe it's Achilles or ACL tear,
ACL. Yeah.
torn ACL. So a team was like, well, we don't even know if he's going to be back and healthy and stuff like that. So it was kind of
Oh,
one of
you're
those.
saying if he proves to be healthy, in a way?
If he proves to be healthy, so like because I know like you're saying like even if he's healthy and the 49ers cut him, you think he'll be back. But the thing is if he,
I'm mistaken. Okay. If he proves to be healthy, but you want to stash him, if I'm the 49ers, I place him on the IR or I keep him on the active roster. I don't cut him.
Okay. That's what I was
If
confused
he's
by. I
healthy,
didn't know.
if he's healthy, you don't cut him.
Okay, that's what I was trying to make sure.
Yeah. If he's healthy, you don't cut him. You probably I'd expect the 49ers to place him on the IR just to give him the extra 3 weeks and then activate him after that come week 4. Not only to give them the extra 3 weeks, but to give them a body that an extra body as well to work with during that time, which potentially gives you a chance to bring Castro Fields on or maybe even Deommodore Lenore on. But I think you do keep Verret. And then as for the 6, we talked about Ward, Mosley being locks. I think Ambry Thomas at this point is a lock as well. That's 3. If you count Verret, that's 4. I don't think Dante Johnson will make the initial 53, but when Verret probably gets moved to IR, he will. So you got 2 more spots. I think Womack definitely makes it. And so the last one's between Lenore and it's between Tariq Castro Fields. If I'm the 49ers personally, I'm going with Castro Fields over Lenore. The reason is the 49ers haven't moved Lenore to the inside yet. Lenore was practicing on the outside for the minicamp and for the OTA period, meaning I don't know if the 49ers believe that he can play slot cornerback in the NFL. Maybe it's because of the tackling issues, but I'm not exactly sure. But they've kept him on the outside, and they've also kept Castro Fields as a cornerback as well. So I think that I prefer Castro Fields just because Castro Fields has more upside. He also is what the 49ers want. He, in my opinion, is like an Ahkello Witherspoon type of player in the archetype. He's long, he's fast, he's an athlete pretty much who needs refinement in pass coverage. And I like your idea as well, potentially moving him to a safety type of player, at least in his first year, while spots necessarily aren't there on the outside.
So before I talked about the cornerback position, we're going to be moving to the running back side of the ball, right? Because we forgot that side on offense. Yeah. But we have a lot of guys watching us, I should say. I was going to say following us, but we have a lot of guys watching right now. So make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure you guys drop a comment. Any question you guys ask, we will answer. We want to be. This is more so a camp preview. So if anyone has any questions, this is where you ask them now, or forever hold your peace. So this is a good question that I started earlier. I want to come back to it, right? Because we forgot the running back position, right? So I think there's 3 locks to make the roster. I think Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon. That's why I kind of forgot about it, because I think it's kind of known that these guys are going to make the roster at the running back position. We got Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, and we also have Davis. And then it gets a little tricky because you have Jermichael Hasty, you have Jeff Wilson Jr.,
and then
you
Jordan
also
Mason.
and Mason, right? We know who for sure is guaranteed to make the roster as well. Kyle Youscheck. So there's no point to talk about
Yeah.
Kyle, right? He's a legit guy. Who do you think makes the last running back position? Do you think it's Jeff Wilson Jr., Jordan Mason, or Jermichael Hasty? Because I have a very, very interesting idea on who's going to make the roster, out of those guys.
I think it's Jordan Mason. I personally just believe it's Jordan Mason. I've kind of believed it for a while. Even before he was on the field, I was pretty high on him as one of the better undrafted signings. I thought he was a top 5 signing for the 49ers in the undrafted pool. And I think the reason is we saw, or obviously the film's there at Georgia Tech, but what he's done so far in minicamp, he's been their most reliable pass catcher, which is a necessity in an Anthony Lynn run offensive scheme. Anthony Lynn, when you look at it, Austin Eckler and Melvin Gordon, both were good pass catchers during his time in Los Angeles. DeAndre Swift was one of the top 5 pass catchers from running backs in the NFL last year after not having that much volume the year before. So that is what Anthony Lynn does, and he needs someone to fit that system. And so to me, that immediately rules out Jermichael Hasty. He doesn't have the hands capable to carry that type of role. Elijah Mitchell was fairly good last year. He had 19 catches on 20 targets for 137 yards. But I think you also want one more player like that, because Trey Sermon and TDP, in my eyes, are primarily run first running backs. They're not third down running backs.
Nah, man. So the thing is, though, is Trey Sermon actually, when he was at Oklahoma, he was a very solid receiver out of the backfield. When he went to Ohio State, they didn't really use him out of the backfield. So prior to moving to Ohio State, he was used out of the backfield, and there was times where he had like a couple games where he had 2 catches for like 67 yards or 80 yards, something like that. He's very reliable out of the backfield. I just think he hasn't been used out of the backfield like he should be. I think he's very capable of coming out of the back. But like you said, because at Ohio State, they kind of used him more as like a true running back. But at Oklahoma, he was a legit receiving guy, and I thought when he transferred to Ohio State, I thought they were going to use him in that category as well as a receiver, but they didn't. But I agree with what you're saying. I think Jordan Mason brings that element as a third down receiver, which Jermichael Hasty was that guy who brought, right? Like that's what the 49ers kept him around as the receiving back. But Jordan Mason brings more as a running back. But go ahead and keep because I interrupted you, my bad.
Yeah. And so the last point I want to make about Jordan Mason, I think he's a true third down back, because not only does he have the receiving option, he's got good size, got good speed, and also got good pass blocking because he's strong. We've seen clips. There have been clips where Jordan Mason has just been able to utilize that strength of his to pick up incoming defensive linemen or incoming linebackers and helping out over there during his college days at Georgia Tech. I think that could be utilized as a third down back, because then you have the option, maybe, is he going to be a receiver? Is he going to stay back in the backfield? It keeps defenses guessing. Whereas Tyrion Davis-Price, good pass blocker, but doesn't have hands whatsoever. So when he's out there on third down, you know that it's going to be a passing play, and you know that he's not going to be he's not going to be a receiving threat, similar to how Jermichael Hasty was.
And the thing too is, like, Elijah Mitchell is pretty solid out of the backfield. Like that's something he's solid at. Trey Sermon, I think Trey Sermon is underrated at that. Oklahoma State, that's what he was. Oklahoma, not Oklahoma State. Oklahoma, that's how he was used. But like you say, Jordan Mason is that guy who should make the roster. He provides more as a running back. He provides that extra ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. But then we also have Jeff Wilson Jr., right, who
Yeah.
could take over the workload if need be. I mean, he's done it a couple games in his career where he shows this extreme flash, but then he's also always hurt. So it's like, what do you do when a player like Jeff Wilson is always hurt, but he's a very good back? It all comes down to whether they're healthy or not. But he has a 1 year um, contract. His cap hit
Right.
is only his dead cap is only 530,000 this year, so 500,000. Not much of a dead cap. It's a cap casualty you could take on. You could keep a guy like Mason who is team friendly for the next couple of years. You control his next 4 to 5 years in terms of because he's undrafted and everything like that. So I do think Mason makes the roster. That was a very good question. If anyone else has any questions, make sure you tap in because I know my guy CJ Gray has a question. He says, "What up with Jack Hammer talking about keeping Jimmy? He has to go." We agree. We think Jimmy Garoppolo is on the move, whether he gets traded or he gets cut. It makes no sense to bring Jimmy Garoppolo back, especially because the big contract. Even if the 49ers restructure that contract, it makes no sense to bring Jimmy Garoppolo back and have a locker room guy who kind of divides the locker room, right? Because one, I know what Jack Hammer put out, like, oh, well, Steve Young had Joe Montana in his quarterback room for a couple years while he was there. Well, when Steve Young took over, they actually traded off Joe Montana to hand the reins to Steve Young. So it's complete what Jack's saying kind of like goes a little bit back on like yeah, Steve Young was mentored or not I should say mentored, but he was behind Joe Montana for a couple years. Joe was hurt, but like once that happened, like once they were ready to officially give it to Steve, they shipped him off. Like they didn't really keep him around. Like keeping a guy around like Joe Montana would have hurt, in my opinion, would have hurt Steve Young in terms of if Steve Young has this mentality, okay, if I have one bad game, they're going right back to Joe. Even though we already knew Steve Young was a very capable quarterback. So like stuff like that, I think you
Yeah.
just gotta get rid of Jimmy. I think Rohan agrees with that.
Yeah.
Um, so we weren't going to talk about it, but this question has us leading to that last receiver spot, as well as I do want to talk about that last tight end spot. So before we talk about that last tight end spot, which would be the last group, let's go ahead and talk about the last receiving group spot. So we have Tay Martin, right, who potentially could be that last receiver spot. We have Keyshawn Johnson. We have Marcus Johnson. We have Austin Mack. We have Tasir Mack. We have Tay Martin. Who else? Malik Turner. Am I missing anyone?
Oh, I don't think so. I think you covered. I think you said Keyshawn Johnson. So yeah, I think you got everybody.
Because the six locks is Brandon Ayuk, Danny Gray, Jawan Jennings, Deebo Samuel, Ray McLeod. That's five.
Yeah.
The 49ers normally carry six receivers on their roster.
Yep.
So who's that sixth receiver that they carry on their roster? Do you think Tay Martin could push to be on the roster? I think he's a if he doesn't make the roster, I think he's a lock for the practice squad. I think he
Yeah.
reminds me a lot of Kendrick Bourne.
I like that comparison, and I think Tay Martin of all the like undrafted guys, or of all like the young guys who haven't necessarily had a big shot, and I mean Marcus Johnson, Keyshawn Johnson, Austin Mack, and Tay Martin, along with Taysir Mack. Of those five, I think Tay Martin has the best shot to make the roster, just because I think he provides the most. He is reliable, good hands, had a great year last year at Oklahoma State, over 1,000 yards. And while he might not be the fastest receiver, he's a reliable receiver, which is good in the short to intermediate depth. As a kind of a first down move guy who moves the chains, you can work him out of the slot, and he could be a good complement to Juwan Jennings. But there's a name I didn't mention that I think is also a sneaky pick to make the roster, and that's Malik Turner. Malik Turner, he's shown capability to play as a receiver. He's only 25 years old. Back in Seattle I think it was 2019 or 2020, caught 245 receiving yards on 25 catches. It was 15 catches for 245 receiving yards. So he has had limited action as a receiver. He's also, though, most importantly, had good action as a special teamer over the last 2 years in Dallas. 39% of the of the special team snaps back in 2020 when he was with our very own special teams coordinator, Brian Schneider. So he has familiarity with this special team system, with the aggressiveness that Brian Schneider deploys with. But he also has experience as a special teamer, played 49% of the defensive snaps in 2020, 40, and then 59% of the defensive snaps in 2021. So he's played a good amount of special teams. I keep saying defensive, I mean special teams. He's played a good amount of special teams. And I think that is what the 49ers really need from that sixth receiver spot in 2022, because the guys that we've mentioned, only Ray McLeod really plays a significant amount of special teams of that group. I know Juwan Jennings can play special teams, but I don't think that the 49ers want to deploy Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel as much on special teams anymore, exert more on their bodies when they're trying to be wide receiver 1s and 2s. So I think that Danny Gray could potentially, but I think that sixth guy should be relegated to a primarily special teams role.
So I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna go on a very interesting guy who makes the roster as a sixth receiver. It's actually Tay Martin. I think Tay Martin actually does make the roster because he reminds me of that Kendrick Bourne, that reliable receiver who is going to come out in preseason and shine. And there's going to be a team that's like, wow, like how do like this guy looks very good. And if we look at the Shrine Bowl game, a lot of people don't realize, but when you have these games that are kind of, how should I explain it? Like they're like kind of like your all-star games for college, right? So
Yeah.
the Shrine Game is one of those all-star games. Well, Tay Martin was able to do that, and he performed at the Shrine Game very well. In college, he had very, very good statistics in terms of what he provided. Now he bounced around a little bit in terms of what schools he went to. He went to Washington State, played there 3 years. But last year he had a phenomenal year. He had 80 receptions for 1,046 yards. He had 10 touchdowns. So he knows how to get to the end zone. 28 touchdowns overall in his 5 years in college. So that's something that is very valuable. Now, I believe he returned punts as well. I believe he had I want to say 3 or 4 punt returns. So that is something that's there. Now it wasn't a lot, but he's capable of actually doing so. Now Tay Martin is the guy. Like I said, Kendrick Bourne, but I think Kendrick Bourne with more juice to him, right? He now he did run the 40 unofficial 40 and his 4.68 and a 4.59,
Yeah.
but I think he plays a lot faster than those speeds,
faster.
like a lot faster than that 40 time, and that's the reason why I think he makes the roster. The other guys, they don't have much dead caps. They're older guys. They're guys that, I mean, they're camp bodies. Hey, let's see what he has. Let's see what these guys have. I don't think the 49ers need those guys for special teams. They sign guys for special teams like George Odom and guys like Oren Burks. Those are their special team aces now. You don't have to worry about finding a special teams ace as your sixth receiver, but more so you got to find someone who can actually be a actual receiver, but still provide special teams, right? Like, because he could be a gunner on kickoff. He could be a gunner on punt. So those are things that are very valuable for a sixth receiver, and I think he's capable of doing so. So I think he's going to be the sixth receiver that makes the roster, and I think he's going to be the receiver that shines with Brock Purdy and Nate Sudfeld in preseason. So I think that's what ends up making the roster for him. He is a guy that is going to give you reliable hands, reliable routes. That's why he ends up making the roster. Very similar to how Kendrick Bourne shined and impressed Kyle Shanahan. Yes, Deebo, that like button. Hit that like button. Hit that like button. Keep tapping. Make sure you like that. Make sure you subscribe to the 49er Red Zone. Of course, Trey is the biggest key to our success, but I think that the cohesion and ability to protect Trey is the most important. If the O-line dominates, we will win Super Bowl 6. Your thoughts? I think that is a very good argument. If the 49ers have a legit offensive line, or their offensive line is playing, I think even if they play top 15 caliber, I think they have an opportunity to win the Super Bowl, because I think 49ers are going to have a top 5 defensive unit. They're going to have they should have a top 5 to top 10 rushing game. And with the ability to throw over the top, ability to stretch the field with Trey Lance, I think the 49ers have a very strong case to compete for a Super Bowl in Trey Lance's first official year starting. Now, do we usually see quarterbacks in their first official year starting win Super Bowls? We don't. But the thing is when you have this many weapons at the tight end position, at the receiving core position, the running backs, the defense is so deep. So honestly, this is the best 49ers team that they've had since 2019. I think they're even deeper than that 2019 unit because Deebo Samuel wasn't what he was in 2019 that he is now. Brandon Ayuk is on the roster. George Kittle, guys like that. So talking about George Kittle, right? I believe the 49ers have one of the best. I think they have a top 10, a top 5 team in the NFL that depth wise. So let's talk about tight end, right? One position. I think there's one position available at the tight end position, um, and that's a debate because um, some people think Charlie Warner will make the roster, some don't. Some think Ross Dwelly makes the roster. We know George Kittle is going to be George Kittle. He's going to 100% make the roster. But the intriguing name that I want to ask you about is Tyler Croft, right? That's the player the 49ers signed this year. Talk to me about Tyler Croft and the tight end group. So who do you think is going to make that roster? Because the Niners last year, I believe they kept 3 tight ends last year.
Yeah, 3 was Dwelly, Warner, and George Kittle. So, I mean, if we're talking about the incumbents, right, a lot of people do like Ross Dwelly. He had a solid 2020 filling in for George Kittle. However, I think, and I've heard from the 49ers, or not from the 49ers, but I've heard that the 49ers don't view Ross Dwelly as an impact player. They view him as a primary backup, and Ross Dwelly can't block. Charlie Warner can, and I think the biggest indicator of where the 49ers are heading in the tight end position was in snap count last year. Ross Dwelly played a ton in 2020 when George Kittle was injured for those 8 games. What was the snap count in 2021? Charlie Warner played 23% of the offensive snaps. Ross Dwelly significantly decreased to only 18%. He was the number 3 tight end on the roster. I actually think Charlie Warner even has untapped potential in the receiving game. He had 5 catches last year on 6 targets, and he looked pretty good in the preseason as well. I think he's a good blocker, which takes off some of the load from George Kittle, and I think he has untapped potential. I prefer him as tight end number 2. Now, as that tight end number 3 spot, you talk about Tyler Croft. Tyler Croft's been around for a while, and he's definitely had receiving capability. I look specifically at his age 25, 2017 year, had 400, I think it was 404 yards on 42 receptions. Most importantly, though, 7 touchdowns. 49ers probably want red zone threats this offseason at that tight end position, especially if you have a primary blocker. You have George Kittle, who can also serve in the red zone, but you want receiving options that are big as red zone threats. I think that's important, and I think that is something that Tyler Croft could bring alongside some of the other names on this roster. And really quick before I go, the other tight end that the 49ers were interested in, right, during the George Kittle era, Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed was a big-time receiver back in Washington, another big-time threat in the red zone. I think the 49ers are trying to look for a guy who can replicate what Jordan Reed could have been had he not been injured.
So I also think Tyler Croft is the intriguing guy that ends up making the roster as the 3rd guy. I think George Kittle is a lock. I think Charlie Warner is that guy who the 49ers drafted for a reason. They think he's a very valuable blocking tight end. They believe that's what he is. He's the blocking tight end. Now I think the best option out of the receiving group is either Tyler Croft or Jordan Matthews, because Jordan Matthews is a former receiver who transitioned to tight end last year. And I think he actually was very close to making the roster to start. And then he ends up, I think he goes added onto the roster towards the end of this, like middle of the season. So it's between Tyler Croft and Jordan Matthews for me. I think those are 2 guys that could compete to be that 3rd tight end. Now, the reason why I think Tyler Croft has the edge over Jordan Matthews is because the 49ers are going to go to a little bit of what Trey Lance ran at North Dakota State, right? They had that 3 tight end set where Trey Lance goes under center and they run play action out of it. And now they have George Kittle and a guy like Tyler Croft running free. And George, if you look at what Trey Lance likes, he likes to target tight ends that are big. For example, you and I were very big on Josh Babbage to sign with the 49ers or at least get drafted by the 49ers. And that's very similar play style Tyler Croft has to Josh Babbage, right? So that's to me, I think Tyler Croft ends up making the roster as a 3rd tight end. As of now, this is everything that Rohan and I have said is very early indications of who's going to make the roster. Because if we look at it, we're like 5 days away from training camp. So what you and I are saying could be very different in 2 to 3 weeks when we see who's performing and who's actually outworking who on that practice field and who's actually getting the more reps And then when training camp, when preseason comes, usually that week 1, week 2 week is when you kind of see who's going to make the roster, especially when the first 2-3 series roll out. You can see who the 49ers actually have an idea for. But I do think Tyler Croft, because the way the 49ers signed him, it was like a low-key signing, right? Last year he was very solid for the New York Jets. He had 200, roughly like 200 yards, roughly. So I think that's a guy who the 49ers fans should look out for, because he signed a fairly decent deal, I believe, with the 49ers. It was a 1-year deal. Prior to that, he had like an $18 million deal with the Buffalo Bills. So actually, I'm wrong. So Tyler Croft signed a 1-year, $1.2 million,
right?
but his dead cap is actually like 25,000.
Yeah. His dead cap isn't much, but I believe out of all the major like guys that could be fighting for it, the guys that I like, the guys that what was I gonna say? That are on the bubble, right? I think he's the one with the dead cap. Everybody else I don't think has any dead cap money, although 25,000, albeit, is not that much. The 49ers cut Michael Pruitt last year, who was owed $537,000 in guarantees. So it's not that much, but it could be something to know.
I actually never thought Michael Pruitt was going to make the roster for some reason. Like everything about him, I was like, they already have their blocking tight end in Ross, not Ross Wally, in Charlie Warner and everything. So I think more so the 49ers looking for a tight end that could actually be a blocking tight end and a receiving tight end, and that definitely leads to Tyler Croft, in my opinion. I mean, that's where I'm headed. Any other question anyone has, make sure you drop it, because Rohan are going to pretty much wrap this about up. We're 46 in. Rohan and I have done, in my opinion, I thought we did a hell of a podcast today, talking pre-training camp and everything, and giving a little preview on every position group. Anything to end the podcast, Rohan, before we give everyone some time to drop questions if they have any? Any questions you have in terms of what we could see at training camp or anything like that?
Yeah, so everybody, you guys make sure you subscribe and like this podcast episode, because guess what? I'm actually going to be at training camp for most of the days. I think I have tickets for 8 of the days. So I'm going to be there, definitely going to take my notebook, have my coverage. So be sure to check out 49ers RedZone for the coverage of every single day, and then be sure to check out our podcast when it comes out, because we're going to have information, straight first-handed information. I know Marco will have his sources. I will have myself as a source as well. And we will be breaking down what we see from training camp on the daily, pretty much, or as much as we can. So be sure to keep an eye out, and we will definitely be on the lookout with all of our information.
So you guys heard Rohan. He's going to be at 8 days of training camp. That's very important. He's probably going to be at back-to-back days. So right away, as soon as he sees Trey Lance on the field, he's going to break the news that Trey Lance is actually no arm fatigue, right? So that's going to be very interesting. Now, I'm going to be hunting wedding venues all next week, but I will try to jump on the podcast with you, because I know we start training camp, so it's a very, very important time. But there's also very important things. I got to find a wedding venue. I got to get married one of these days, so I got to make sure I find a wedding venue with my fiance. But if I don't end up tapping in with Rohan, you guys tap in with Rohan, because after that, I come back and I'm going to very best believe we're going to be tapping in with a very good podcast right after that. Will Trey Lance play this preseason? I think yes. I think, of course, 100%. The first game, I think he goes way more than 1 to 2 series. I think the 49ers give him at least a quarter of reps. That's what I would hope for a young quarterback like Trey Lance.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, even if it is the 1 or 2 series, I think regardless of what it is, he's going to play. Jimmy Garoppolo last year definitely didn't need any preseason time at all. He's an experienced veteran with 5 years in the system. He knew everything, and obviously they didn't want to get him injured, and still he played in the preseason. Trey Lance, this is the way he's going to get the biggest reps, right? He hasn't gotten many reps yet, and preseason is the first indicator against other teams where he'll be able to get these reps. I think he definitely will.
So that's it for today's episode. Me and Rohan went an hour and 50 deep. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to the 49ers RedZone podcast. Make sure you guys follow Rohan on every platform. He's busting his ass for 49ers RedZone. constantly writing amazing articles there. He's constantly putting out great content on Twitter, constantly jumping on other people's podcasts. So make sure you guys are tapped in with him because he does a lot of work for everyone to actually be able to see what the 49ers are doing in a different perspective, because Rohan goes on a very analytical base. So make sure you guys tap in with Rohan. He will give you guys great content. I promise you. If you like what he said today, you guys are going to like what he writes, especially about the training camp practices, what he says about training camp, because he's going to give you a very unbiased perspective. He's not going to sugarcoat anything. He's usually very straightforward with things. So that's something that if you don't like other reporters on how they sugarcoat things or how they talk, Rohan's not going to do that stuff. He's going to give you guys straight how it is, but he's also not going to take it to an extreme and disrespect anyone. At least I hope not. At least I don't, like, you know what I mean?
That's not my vibe either. Yeah.
Yeah. So make sure you guys tap in with Rohan. Until next time, thank y'all for